talk today. Today we're talking about gratitude, everything sacred, nothing serious. To give you a taste of what that means, everything sacred, nothing serious, I'm going to open with a quote. This is from Autobiography of a Yogi, a great, great book. There's so much good pearls of wisdom in here. There is also some crazy stuff in here, by the way. So it's up to you how much of it you take literally, historically, or you take metaphor and just gain the wisdom from there. So this is Yogananda talking about his teacher, Sri Yukteswar, which I'm sure is exactly how you're supposed to pronounce that. My guru's ready wit and rollicking laugh enlivened every discussion. Often grave, master was never gloomy. To seek the Lord, men need not disguise their faces, he would say. Often grave, never gloomy. So you can talk about profound subjects, death, love, life. You can delve into that with profound meaning without necessarily taking it or each other or ourselves too seriously. And so how do we make something sacred? Well, I'm going to refer to another quote here. By the way, this is a great book. There are some amazing pearls of wisdom in here. There are also some things in here that are crazy. But it's up to you. It's up to you how much of it you take literally, historic, or how much of it you take as symbolism and lessons. So this is the New Revised Standard Version from the book of John. The story of the loaves and the fishes, the story of the feeding of the masses. That was such a popular story that it showed up in all four of those Gospels. Mark, Matthew, Luke, and John. It showed up twice in Mark. In case you don't know the basic story, which I bet you do, this is Jesus with 286,403 people needed to be fed, something like that. And he only had like a burrito bowl. Had to feed all these people. Might have the details a little bit off. This is from John chapter 6, starting at around verse 9. Jesus said, "Make the people sit down." Now there was a great deal of grass in the place, so they sat down. Let me pause there. So the first thing Jesus did in this story, let's just calm ourselves down. Let's just take a moment of silence. Let's just pause and become still. So I think that gives us a clue to the first ingredient. Then Jesus took the loaves, and when he had given thanks, and it's not just giving thanks, it's a blessing. So he's giving thanks. He's being grateful for the food that they have and lifting them up and probably doing a traditional Hebrew blessing over them. So after the pausing, the sitting down, after the blessing, after the giving thanks, he distributed them to those who were seated. So also the fish, as much as they wanted. I think that's an important lesson there. Those ingredients, those key steps to creating a sacred space, to creating a sacred experience, to allowing something to be precious and important. Pause. In the silence. I was here last Sunday, and Jackie mentioned how cool it would be if all of our politicians did pause at the beginning of any session in prayer. And I think that is such a great idea, by the way, that all of our legislators and politicians should pause in the silence and stay in the silence. How much better off we might be. I think that is the first ingredient. And the next is the blessing. We offer our blessing. Whatever that looks like, whether it's a fancy ceremony, whether that's kneeling and physically putting your hands in prayer, whatever it looks like, and to give thanks. I think if we do those three things, we create that sacred space. And we can do it with anything. I think we can do that, and yet at the same time, remember, it is just a ride. Enjoy the ride. Bill Hicks, a comedian, was great at reminding us that life is just a ride. And this is also him talking about how interesting it would be if a newscaster, we watch the news. Actually, I do not recommend you watch the news. But if you watch the news, imagine if it sounded like this one time. Today, a young man realized that all matter is merely energy condensed to a slow vibration, that we are all one consciousness, experiencing itself subjectively. There is no such thing as death. Life is only a dream, and we're the imagination of ourselves. Here's Tom with the weather. One thing I need to remember and remind myself to not take too seriously is myself. Is when I notice that furrowed brow up here, I'm thinking, I'm putting all this energy into this, I'm probably taking myself a little too seriously. And when I'm not speaking and doing unity stuff, and when I'm not doing improv stuff, and when I'm not doing the Buddha brunch and interviews and creating all this stuff, which you can find at nedkelly.net, when I'm not doing that, I work at an escape room. I'm the manager of a place called The Escape Room, Kansas City. It's a fun place. You play games. We lock you in a room. You have to try to escape, literally. If you haven't checked it out, I wholeheartedly recommend it. The other morning, like 9 a.m., and I had already been there for a half hour, and I was sweeping. One of my employees came in. I won't use his real name. I'll call him Douglas. So Douglas comes in, and I say, "Hey, good morning, Douglas. How are you? Glad you're here." And he walks by. You know, his eyes are barely open. He's barely awake. He'd probably been out late for the night before. He uttered he barely even turned his head. It wasn't English. It was like doing the gibberish thing, you know. Unless it was some language that only 20-year-olds can understand, you know. And I just kind of let it go. I thought to myself, you know, he's young. He's probably partying. Even though I had been out late the night before, and I had already been there for a half hour, and I had been sweeping, you know, on all that stuff. But he just walks by. Yeah. Okay, that's fine. I don't mind. No big deal. We'll give him a chance. We'll give him some time to get settled into the place and wake up. But literally, so he walks across. Literally 2 seconds later, the phone rings, and because he had walked towards the counter, he was right by the phone. He picks up the phone and he says, "Thank you for calling the Escape Room Kansas City. This is Douglas. How may I help you?" You can turn it on. You can turn it on for the phone, I thought to myself, for customer service, because they're important, and you know you need to treat them with respect and enthusiasm, but you can't turn it on for me, your boss? Good morning, Douglas. So I was really tempted to have a coaching moment with Douglas after the phone call, to sit down, and I couldn't, but what was I going to say? What would that have looked like? You know, Douglas, I need you to care about me more. I'm more important. Yeah, I know our customers are important, and but I want you to think of me as, oh, never mind. So I didn't bring it up. I just took it as a teaching, coaching moment for myself, internally. Well, Ned, get over it. A very good friend of mine who helps me remember to not take myself so seriously is the famous stained glass artist, Brian Lewis. I know he's famous. Who comes to mind when you think of any stained glass artist? Is it Brian Lewis, right? Probably is. That's how I know he's famous. He told me how he went the other morning, just around sunrise. He was out at Unity Village, and he went to the Labyrinth. I wholeheartedly recommend the Labyrinth as a place to go and walk and meditate. And Brian told me how he went there this morning and sat in the center. And very, very simple. It doesn't have to be ornate. Sitting, sunrise, and this message from within came to him, this affirmation, this revelation, this inner voice spoke to him and said, I don't know shit. You know, it doesn't have to be all that big and fancy. Every moment, every day, we can do it. If we perhaps do those three things: pause in the silence, give thanks for whatever it is we can be grateful for in any shape or form, and offer our own blessing. Then we transform it. It is sacred. And hopefully we remember to enjoy the ride. Hopefully we can remember to enjoy the ride as well.